You're listening to Trace Hunt Radio. We explore the darkest chapters of true crime, unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and the twisted minds behind them. Follow the blood, chase the clues, uncover the truth. Stay sharp. The hunt begins now.
They called it the Midnight Library, a place where whispers seemed to echo between the shelves, and history itself breathed from the yellowed pages of centuries-old manuscripts. It was the kind of place where secrets didn't just live. They waited. On a cold winter morning, long before sunrise, the librarian on duty failed to answer the routine security call. Concerned staff unlocked the building and descended into the rare manuscripts vault, a sealed chamber with a single reinforced door. Thick stone walls and no windows. Inside, they found her. The head librarian, slumped over the reading desk, eyes frozen in shock. No sign of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just a pool of dark blood. And, strangely, a leather-bound book opened before her. The crime scene puzzled detectives from the start. How could someone be murdered inside a locked vault, with no one seen entering or leaving? And why was the victim clutching a page corner as if trying to send a message? The answer would not come from fingerprints or security footage. It would come from something far older, a centuries-old manuscript hiding a secret even the killer didn't know they'd left behind. This is the story of the Midnight Library murder, and the historian's deadly secret that took more than one life. Chapter 1: The Discovery. The night shift at the Eldonboro City Library was usually uneventful. Once the last patron left at 9 p.m., the heavy oak doors were locked, and the building settled into its familiar nighttime hush, the faint hum of the climate control system, the occasional creak of floorboards contracting in the cold, and the distant chime of the clock tower marking each hour. But at exactly 5:15 a.m., that quiet was broken. Security guard Thomas Keating had called the rare manuscripts vault for a routine status check, as he did every morning. The call rang and rang, no answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Concern prickled the back of his neck. In his 5 years on the job, Dr. Elaine Harcourt, the head librarian and archivist for the vault, had never missed a call. She was as precise as the mechanisms in the clock tower above their heads. Keating grabbed the master keys and descended the spiral staircase into the sub-basement where the vault was located. The deeper he went, the colder the air grew, not just from the climate control for preserving the rare books, but from a sense of something wrong. At the foot of the stairs, the reinforced vault door loomed before him, steel riveted and sealed with a digital lock. Only 3 people in the entire city had the code. Elaine was one of them. Keating keyed in his access and twisted the wheel. The door hissed open. The sight inside would haunt him for the rest of his life. Elaine sat slumped forward in her chair, her head resting against the surface of the desk as though she'd fallen asleep reading. But the dark pool beneath her made it immediately clear she hadn't simply drifted off. Her blouse was soaked in blood, a single wound piercing just above her heart. The reading lamp still burned, casting a warm glow over the scene. On the desk before her lay a large leather-bound book, open to a single page. Elaine's right hand clutched the edge of the paper so tightly that the nail had split, leaving a faint smear of blood along the margin. Keating's voice cracked as he called it in. "This is Keating in the vault. We've got a code black, and God, you better send CID." Detective Inspector Lydia Crane arrived 20 minutes later. She was tall, sharp-featured, and had the unblinking eyes of someone who missed nothing. Her first question to Keating wasn't about the murder. It was about the door. "You're telling me the vault was locked from the inside?" Keating nodded. "Dead-bolted. No sign anyone came in or out." Crane stepped into the vault, her gloved hands tracing the air rather than touching anything. The vault was a sealed chamber. Stone walls, steel door, no windows. Climate vents too narrow for anything larger than a fist, a perfect locked room scenario. But what caught her attention wasn't the blood, or even the body. It was the book. It was not one of his standard cataloged items, at least not one she'd ever seen in the vault before. The leather was cracked with age, the spine unmarked by any library code. A faint musty odor rose from it, mixed with something metallic. "What is this doing here?" she murmured. The forensic team began photographing every inch of the room, while the coroner confirmed time of death, approximately 3 a.m., cause a single precise stab wound delivered with surgical accuracy. No defensive injuries. Elaine had either trusted her killer or never saw them coming. Then came the first twist. When the crime scene techs attempted to log the book, they found no record of it in the library's database. In fact, according to the inventory, this title didn't exist. No accession number. No history of acquisition. And yet, a quick glance at the open page revealed something even stranger. The text, written in 17th century French, was a diary entry. But the final paragraph was not written in the same hand or ink. It was modern, black ballpoint pen, and it said, "You were never supposed to find this, Elaine." From that moment, the murder stopped being just a homicide. It became a hunt for whoever had managed to breach the most secure room in the library, leave behind a message inside a centuries-old book, and vanish without a trace. For Crane, one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a killing, this was about history. A piece of it had been hidden for centuries, and someone was willing to kill to keep it that way. The Midnight Library murder had begun. Chapter 2. The shipment that never arrived. By mid-morning, the vault had been sealed, photographed, and measured down to the millimeter. What it did not yield was a way in or out that made sense. Detective Inspector Lydia Crane logged the geometry anyway steel door with internal deadbolt and keypad. No windows. 2 climate vents too narrow for a child's forearm. A dumbwaiter for transferring folios to the conservation lab above measuring 40 by 50 centimeters. Bolted shut from the outside at 10:01 p.m. per the maintenance log. If the killer had entered, they'd done it before closing and somehow left a room that locked itself from the inside. So Crane stepped away from the room that refused to speak and listened instead to the paper. The victim, Dr. Elaine Harcourt, had lived like a scholar even at work. Desk trays of orderly notes, penciled marginalia in a precise hand, calendar blocks filled with initials rather than words. On the notice board by her office, Crane found a sequence of post-its like stepping stones. Hawthorne Bequest, Box 7, unaccessioned. 1666 shipment, St. Cloud gives Eldenborough. Inventory gaps does not equal clerical. Ascaviri provenance narratives. Crane circled the last line with her pen. AV. The library's director, Malcolm Paris, explained a shorthand over coffee gone cold. AV is Dr. Adrian Valar Celebrity in Residence, television historian. The Battlefields and Boulevards series? He's writing a popular history on the city's post-plague rebirth. We gave him an honorary research card and after-hours access to the reading rooms, not the vault. Friends with Dr. Harcourt? Crane asked. Paris hesitated. Colleagues, spirited debates about provenance. Elaine was protective of the collection's integrity. Vale prefers engaging stories. Crane let that sit. Then, what's the Hawthorne bequest? A sealed donation last year from the Hawthorne family's attics. We're still cataloging. A lot of late 17th century ephemera receipts, personal diaries, account books. Most went straight to manuscripts. A few boxes were earmarked for rare. Box 7 was contentious. How so? Paris pushed a form across his desk. In the disposition column for Hawthorne Box 7, someone had stamped unaccessioned in red, then crossed it out and written temporary verify provenance in Elaine's hand. Beside that, a line inked in a finer script. Nonsense, ship it to rare. AV. Crane took the form in gloved fingers. So Vale wanted Box 7 in the vault. He wanted it processed quickly, Paris said carefully. He's under contract. Dates matter when you're syncing a broadcast. Crane filed the tone years of polite friction baked into one sentence. In records, the bequest ledger reluctantly gave up its spine. Box 7's item list, scanned but never posted, described one leather-bound journal, French, 17th C. One shipping ledger fragment, St. Cloud Abbey, assorted receipts. One brass-framed pocket mirror, damaged. The description of the journal matched the book on Elaine's desk-cracked leather, unmarked spine. Yet the database showed no accession number assigned, which meant it should never have been in the vault at all. What's St. Cloud got to do with Edinburgh? Crane asked the archivist. Everything, he said, eyes lighting in the way people do around the thing they've dedicated a life to. After the Great Fire, our city rebuilt with a flood of continental capital and craft. There are gaps in the story shipments of books that appear in letters, but never in inventories. Vale has a whole chapter on the so-called mystery consignment of 1666, cache of French devotional texts rumored to have come through the abbey at St. Cloud for temporary safekeeping before crossing the channel. Some say it never arrived. Others say it did and was quietly repurposed. Repurposed? As in melted, pulped, rebound, reused. Or stolen. History is not tidy. Crane thought of the modern line at the foot of the diary page. You were never supposed to find this, Elaine. Whatever Box 7 contained, it was no longer just ink and calfskin. It was leverage. Timelines first. Crane had evidence lay Elaine's last week on a wall. Mon. Email to the conservation lab, requesting a night cycle for the vault humidity to examine vellum without daytime fluctuations. Tuesday calendar block. H7, ledger and mirror. Translate falls, 113 to 118 FR. WED. Building Wi-Fi logs show Elaine's device and a second device MAC address registered to Adrian Vale overlapping near the manuscript's reading rooms 7:42 to 8:31 p.m. Thurs. Security log notes. After hours access requested by Elaine. Approved 10 p.m. minus 4 a.m. Fry, night of death. Vault dumbwaiter sealed at 10:01 p.m. Elaine's card used on vault at 10:05 p.m. No other card accepted by the vault keypad until Keating's master at 5:34 a.m. Which means, Ruiz said at Crane's shoulder, if it's Vale, he's either in before the lock or never in at all. Or he doesn't touch the keypad, Crane replied. Her eyes had landed on a tiny notation in a maintenance PDF. Vault door auto bolt test. Passes. Manual pull cord for internal release housing replaced 2019. Manual pull cord? Ruiz echoed. Behind the hinge plate for emergencies. Used from inside to retract the deadbolt if the keypad fails. If someone disables the keypad and uses the cord, there's no log. But the cord's inside, Ruiz said. You can't yank it from the corridor. No, Crane agreed, gaze traveling to the tight threshold under the door. But you could loop it with monofilament and drag it shut from outside after you step out. That still leaves you the problem of getting the cord back inside and getting the filament off the door without leaving a trace. Magic, Ruiz said. Or practice, Crane countered. From someone who rehearses narratives for television. They both knew they were getting ahead of the facts, but in a locked room murder, the mechanism is motive's twin. If she could see who would start to choose itself. They sat Dr. Adrian Vale down at noon. On camera, he was a charming explicable. In an interview room with fluorescent hum and a red light, he folded his hands too carefully. A man staging sincerity. You've been in the building after hours, Crane said. I have permissions, he answered. For the reading rooms. Never the vault. I adored Elaine. We argued about public access, but she was the soul of this place. Your device pinged near manuscripts Wednesday night, Ruiz said. Public Wi-Fi bleeds, Vale said lightly. I met a donor for coffee in the atrium. Crane slid 3 photographs across, the diary's open page with the modern line. A screenshot of the Box 7 item list. Is still a Vale and Elaine arguing softly near the lift lobby 3 weeks prior, his hand slicing the air, hers held steady at her side. What did she find? Crane asked. In box 7. Vale's gaze flicked to the line. You were never supposed to find this, Elaine. And away again. Whatever it was, I didn't write that. It's ballpoint, Ruiz said. Clumsy choice for a man who lives on period detail. Detective, Vale said, smile thinning. You don't need to bait me. I respect her work. She was possessed by a notion that our city's golden narrative had darker underpinnings. She loved a ghost story. I prefer the bright rooms where people can see. Crane let a beat tick, then changed angle. Tell me about the mystery consignment of 1666. He brightened in spite of himself. A beautiful chapter. Letters from a factor in St. Cloud to an Eldenborough bookseller, promising delivery of devotional texts and a lay breviary, none of which appear in the official inventories. People vanished that year. So did books. It's a metaphor for post-plague reconstruction. What we choose to keep, what we bury. And Dr. Harcourt thought box 7 held proof it arrived, Crane said. He spread his hands. If so, you'll have your story. I tragically have a deadline. When he left, Ruiz whispered, he's either innocent or the smuggest killer we've had in months. Crane didn't answer. She was staring at a photo the lab had just pushed to her phone, a close-up of the diary's modern line under oblique light. The ballpoint ink, viewed at high magnification, sat over a faint scraped patch, the ghosts of earlier words partially erased with a fiberglass eraser like conservators use. The team had recovered a trace. Adrian, mentor, French, liar. Elaine had been translating when she died. The conservation lab added a second thorn. Microparticulate from Elaine's blouse caught in the weave near the wound contained verdigris consistent with oxidized bronze. Not from the desk lamp or vault hinges, but from a clasp. The Hawthorne ledger fragment referenced UN glass to Pichet a bordure de bronze. A pocket mirror with a bronze border the same described in box 7. The item list said damaged. The lab's photographic table, meanwhile, showed tiny greenish smears on the diary's foredge. Someone had handled both mirror and book just before Elaine collapsed. Crane walked the corridor to manuscripts again. Past the framed posters of Vale's programs, War and 7 Objects, the city that survived itself past the donors' names etched in marble. She stopped at a display case showing a 17th century map of the river wharves, where French goods were offloaded in 1666. In the legend, a tiny mark indicated a customs quay long buried, now the undercroft beneath the library's east wing. History did not merely breathe in this building. It looped. In Elaine's office, the bottom drawer had resisted until records produced the key. Tucked inside a brown interlibrary loan envelope lay a folded note, creased and oily with handling. Crane opened it with the corner of a file. Elaine, stop. Some stories don't want light. You have misread my work. Return box 7. A. The A was a tidy initial that could belong to any number of names. But Crane had another photo open on her phone. A close-up of the Vale inscription on his latest bestseller to the library shop. To the good people of Eldenborough. AV with a distinctive hooked crossbar on the A. Same hand, same habit. Deadlines, Crane murmured, sliding the note into an evidence sleeve. And a historian who edits more than text. When she turned back to the wall of post-its, the sequence she'd circled earlier, a V felt less like shorthand and more like a pointing finger. The mechanism of the room still needed a working diagram. But the Y was beginning to write itself. A famous historian with a brand to protect, a shipment that threatened his thesis, and a scholar who had finally put her finger on a page the city's storytellers preferred not to turn. Outside, the winter light thinned to the blue of early evening. In the vault, a centuries-old diary rested in a bag in a locked cabinet, its last modern line already lifting under an infrared light. Under the scraped patch, letters were waking. A name was forming. And in the lab tray beside it, a cracked bronze-framed mirror waited for the prints that ego always leaves when it admires its own work. Chapter 3. The Mirror Remembers. The bronze-framed mirror from Box 7 sat in the conservation lab, under a sheet of mylar, cracked glass, corroded edges, a relic of someone's vanity centuries ago. But for the crime scene techs, it was fresh evidence. Forensic analyst Marta Lim lifted the mylar and pointed to faint green residue along the frame. Verdigris. Same oxidation particles we found on the victim's blouse. This mirror was handled right before she died. Crane studied it. Prints. Bronze is tricky, but yes, partials. One belongs to Elaine. The other doesn't match staff or the security roster. Veil? Crane asked. Marta's mouth twitched. We'll see. She rotated the mirror under angled light. A hairline crack in the glass caught the beam, and beneath it, a faint smear of oily residue. When enhanced on-screen, the smear resolved into the ghost of a thumbprint. It wasn't just any thumbprint. It had a distinctive scar running through the ridge pattern. Ruiz, leaning over her shoulder, said, "That's not from handling a 17th century artifact carefully. That's someone gripping it hard." Back at CID, the fingerprint database delivered the hit. Dr. Adrian Vale. From a grant application security check 5 years earlier, Crane didn't move immediately. Instead, she cross-referenced the vault log times, CCTV feeds, and the lab's print recovery timeline. The mirror had been touched after Elaine's final database entry at 2:57 a.m., meaning Vale had been inside the vault after she started her final work. How'd he get in without a log? Ruiz asked. Crane tapped the vault schematic on the wall. Manual release cord. I think he was inside before she locked down, maybe hiding in the dumbwaiter shaft before it was bolted. When she opened it to move materials, he stepped out, then locked it from outside when he left, Ruiz finished. Leaving her dead in a room no one else could have entered, Crane said. The perfect locked room illusion. But the case still lacked the why. Elaine's translation notes gave the first clue. They were dense with cross-references between the St. Cloud ledger and the diary. On the final page before the modern message, she'd circle the date, 14 September 1666, the day the mystery consignment supposedly arrived in Eldonborough. The ledger fragment in box 7 listed the items loaded. Devotional text, a lay breviary, and one object described simply as Mirror de Memoire. Memory mirror. Crane asked the archivist if the term meant anything. It's not literal, he said. A memory mirror could refer to a keepsake, something that holds a likeness, miniature portraits, lockets, even encoded messages. In 17th century France, it was also a metaphor for a dangerous truth reflected back at you. A truth worth killing over, Crane said quietly. Later that night, Crane replayed the CCTV from the public reading rooms. At 8:14 p.m. 2 nights before the murder, Vale had been alone at a table, thumbing through a slim book while glancing at the main doors. When Crane froze the frame, she saw the spine. St. Cloud, inventories and dispersals, 1665 to 67. In the margin of one page, visible under zoom, was a note in his handwriting. Mirror equals proof. The forensics lab didn't need the metaphor. The partial print on the diary's modern ink line matched the same scarred thumbprint as on the mirror. By the time the warrant was signed for Vale's office, Crane already knew what she'd find. In his locked bottom drawer sat a USB drive labeled ST Cloud. Inside were high-res scans of the diary's pages, including the one where Elaine had written her translation of the erased words, and where Vale had replaced them with his own warning. The original French line, now restored under infrared, read, Adrian Vale stole the consignment. The mechanism, the motive, the prints, all in place. But Crane still needed to show the jury how Vale had planned it. That would require revisiting the undercroft beneath the library, the old customs key buried in its foundations. If the 1666 consignment had arrived there, and if Vale had found proof, it wasn't just about theft. It was about rewriting the city's history to suit the story he wanted to tell. The mirror had remembered more than a face. It had remembered a secret. And Vale, Crane knew, wasn't done hiding. Chapter 4. The Undercroft. The Undercroft of Eldonborough City Library was not on any public tour map. It lay 3 levels below the street, carved into the bedrock centuries before the library existed. back when the site served as a river customs quay. Stone archways opened into damp corridors, the air heavy with the smell of limestone and river salt. Crane's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as she followed Archivist Oliver Finch. He was one of the few staff who had keys to the ancient padlocks sealing the oldest sections. This area was bricked over in the 1800s, Finch explained, sliding back a rusted bolt. Elaine was cataloging what little we knew about it for a heritage grant. The gate groaned open, revealing a long hall littered with old shipping crates, brittle rope, and the skeletons of wooden pallets. The floor sloped slightly toward a blocked archway, the original water gate where goods were once unloaded from boats. Crane crouched beside a rotted crate stamped with the fleur-de-lis. French origin? Finch nodded. Same mark as the St. Cloud shipment. Half buried under debris was a cracked wooden chest, its lid warped but still bearing a corroded bronze clasp identical to the one on the mirror's frame. Inside were only scraps, linen shreds, paper fragments, and one corner of a ledger page. On it, faint ink read, "Miroir de Memoire, keep sealed until verdict." Crane's phone buzzed. Ruiz's voice came sharp over the static. "We got something from Elaine's home laptop backup. Email drafts she never sent, one addressed to the acquisitions board. She wrote that Vale was pressuring her to misfile Box 7 under miscellaneous bequest, so it wouldn't be formally appraised. She knew it was worth more," Crane said. Or, Ruiz replied, she knew it proved his theory was wrong. Back in the vault, Crane ran her fingers over the diary's leather cover. The cut edges where the modern ink had been added were faintly different from the surrounding page, trimmed and reinserted. That meant someone had altered the book physically before placing it in front of Elaine. Finch stepped forward. Not to speak ill of the dead, but Elaine couldn't have pulled that from the restricted shelving without a secondary key. Only 4 of us have it. Crane's gaze lingered on him for a beat too long. At headquarters, Vale sat in an interview room, his hands folded neatly. "You hid in the undercroft," Crane said. "Waited until Elaine opened the vault, then locked it behind you. You killed her, altered the diary to look like a warning, and walked out before the morning check." Vale's expression barely shifted. "Your theory is creative, Inspector. But you've no proof I was in the vault that night." Crane dropped a printout of the forensic match between his scarred thumbprint in the mirror's frame. "This is your proof." For the first time, the historian's composure cracked. His eyes flicked down to the paper, then back up, but he didn't speak. As Crane left the room, Ruiz caught up with her. "So that's it? We've got him?" "Not entirely," Crane said. "Vale's smart enough to know how to use people. Someone moved that diary into position before he arrived. Someone who could come and go without raising alarms." "You think it's Finch?" Ruiz asked. Crane didn't answer. She only looked back toward the Undercroft key hanging on Finch's office hook. The case had its killer, but maybe it also had a keeper of the door. Chapter 5: Keeper of the Door. Oliver Finch had been with the Eldonborough City Library for 32 years. In that time, staff turnover had cycled dozens of librarians in and out, but Finch stayed, a constant presence in the background, rarely taking holidays, always in before opening and after closing. Crane found him alone in the conservation room, hunched over a map tube. "You've been here longer than anyone," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You know where every key is, every lock, every dead corridor under this building." Finch's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's my job, Inspector." "And you knew about Box 7 before Elaine did?" Crane continued. "You supervised the intake. You also had the secondary key to the restricted shelves where the St. Cloud ledger was kept, the same shelf the diary came from." Finch adjusted his glasses, saying nothing. In her office, Crane laid out the chain on a whiteboard. 1666. Shipment from St. Cloud Abbey bound for Eldonborough disappears en route. 1800s. Undercroft bricked over, records buried. Recent, Hawthorne bequest donates Box 7 containing St. Cloud materials. Last month, Vale begins research linking St. Cloud's shipment to his personal historical theory. 2 weeks ago, Elaine flags anomalies, refuses to misfile. Murder night, Vale enters vault with Finch's help, kills Elaine, alters diary. The only gap, why Finch would help. That answer came from an unexpected source, the acquisitions ledger from 1991, Finch's first year as senior archivist. On page 14, Crane found an unprocessed note, private holding from St. Cloud Lot's store-off record. The handwriting matched Finch's. He'd known for decades where pieces of the 1666 shipment were and had kept them hidden. Vale, a rising historian, offered him something in return. Shared authorship of a landmark paper revealing the truth about St. Cloud, one that conveniently fit Vale's version of history. Elaine's refusal threatened them both. Crane confronted Finch in the Undercroft. "You let him in that night," she said. "You unlocked the door, positioned the diary, made it look like it was already on her desk. You stayed in the reading room while he did the rest." Finch's voice was steady. The truth in those books would have been lost in academic squabbling. Vale wanted to bring it into the light. Elaine would have buried it again. "She's buried now," Crane said flatly. Back at headquarters, the pieces locked in. Vale, direct act of murder, physical evidence, altered diary. Finch, access, facilitation, prior concealment of shipment materials. The prosecution would charge both Vale for murder, Finch for conspiracy and tampering with historical artifacts. But for Crane, one question lingered. What was so dangerous about the St. Cloud shipment that men centuries apart were willing to kill for it? That answer lay in the damaged ledger page from the Undercroft chest, a single line in faded ink that, once enhanced, read, "Within the mirror the names of those who swore the oath." If the mirror truly bore an engraved list of names tied to political treason in 17th century France, it wasn't just an artifact. It was a death warrant. In any century. Chapter 6. The Mirror's Oath. The courtroom was packed, reporters, historians, and a handful of St. Cloud scholars craning to see the evidence table. At its center, resting in a padded display case, sat the bronze-framed mirror. Its cracked glass caught the overhead lights like a fractured halo. Prosecutor Marianne Leary rose. "Detective Inspector Crane, would you tell the court how this mirror came into your possession?" Crane kept her eyes on Vale and Finch as she spoke. It was part of the 1666 St. Cloud shipment, hidden for centuries, then recovered from a bequest known as Box 7. Forensic analysis linked both defendants to it on the night of the murder. But that's not all it holds. The judge gestured. "Proceed." A conservator wheeled in a portable UV light rig. As the lights dimmed, Crane fitted protective goggles and lowered the UV beam over the mirror's backing. At first, the glass reflected nothing but the hazy outlines of the gallery. Then, slowly, faint etchings emerged, lines of script carved into the silvering itself. The jury leaned forward. 17 names, Crane said, each belonging to a French noble who swore an oath against the crown during the Fronde uprisings. If made public in 1666, these names would have sparked executions and political collapse. That's why the shipment was hidden. That's why when Elaine Harcourt began decoding the ledger, she was killed to control how and whether this history was told. The defense scrambled. Vale's attorney claimed the mirror's engraving was a historical curiosity, not motive for murder. Finch's lawyer insisted his client had no idea of the engraving. Crane's rebuttal was a photo taken in Vale's office, a blown-up image of the mirror's etching from a clandestine UV session, time-stamped a week before the murder. "Dr. Vale knew," she said, and Mr. Finch made sure he had the means to get to it. When the verdict came, it was swift. Vale, guilty of murder. Finch, guilty of conspiracy and artifact concealment. The mirror was transferred to state custody to be studied and guarded by experts. Outside the courthouse, snow was falling in thin, wet flakes. Crane walked past the press curtain, the image of the mirror still vivid in her mind. 17 names from centuries ago had sparked ambition, betrayal, and death in her own time. History, she thought, didn't just repeat. It lingered, waiting for someone to open the wrong door. And in the Midnight Library, one door had been opened for the last time.